The Galactic Academy's xenobiology lecture hall buzzed with the nervous energy of 200 students from across the known systems. Professor Zethkar, a distinguished Velfairy with iridescent blue scales and 4 arms, manipulated the holographic display with practiced ease. Today, we examine the predator classification system, Professor Zethkar announced, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. As future xenobiologists, you must understand the universal constants of apex predation across all worlds. Marcus Chen, one of only 3 humans in the prestigious program, adjusted his datapad and tried to look inconspicuous. At 22, he was already used to being the oddity. Humans were still considered a primitive species by most galactic standards, barely a century into space travel. We'll begin with Class Alpha predators, the professor continued. These beings represent the pinnacle of evolutionary hunting perfection. Their vocalizations alone can paralyze prey species through pure psychological terror. The first audio file began playing. A deep, resonating roar filled the chamber, followed by what sounded like the screams of the damned. Around Marcus, students from various species visibly recoiled. The Kethlani in the front row actually fell from their perch, their feathers standing on end. Several Morgthul students began their species equivalent of hyperventilating, rapid color changes across their translucent skin. This, Professor Zethkar said with reverence, is the hunting call of a Velnari bloodstalker from the death world of Carix Prime. Note the psychological impact. Marcus frowned, tilting his head. It sounded familiar somehow. The second audio file was even worse, a series of bone-chilling howls that seemed to speak directly to some primal fear center. The Yildena student beside Marcus began secreting stress pheromones so strongly that the air purification system kicked into overdrive. The pack hunters of Gyrex, the professor explained. Entire colonies have been driven to madness by these sounds alone. The third file made Marcus's eyebrows rise. It was a series of coughs and grunts, interspersed with an odd chattering sound. While his classmates cowered, some actually hiding under their desks, Marcus found himself suppressing a grin. And finally, Professor Zethkar intoned dramatically, the most terrifying predator call in our database. This sound has never been heard by any sentient being who lived to describe the encounter. We recovered it from automated recording devices on the rim world of Pelisur, where an entire research station was eliminated. The final audio file began. A low rumbling growl, followed by what the universal translator labeled as untranslatable aggressive vocalization. It was deep, powerful, and undeniably threatening. Marcus couldn't help himself. A chuckle escaped his lips. The entire lecture hall went silent except for the continuing audio. 200 pairs of alien eyes turned to stare at the human who was laughing. Mr. Chen. Professor Zethkar's voice carried a mixture of confusion and concern. Are you experiencing some form of neurological distress? Should we contact medical services? Marcus realized his mistake immediately. The laughter died in his throat as he looked around at the terrified faces of his classmates. Even the professor's usually composed demeanor showed cracks of uncertainty. Marcus stammered, his face reddening. Sorry, Professor. It's just that. Well, yes. The professor's tone suggested he was genuinely worried about Marcus's mental state. Marcus took a deep breath. There was no backing out now. That last one? That's just a cougar. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the environmental systems seemed to quiet down, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. A cougar, Professor Zethkar repeated slowly. Yeah, Marcus said, his voice gaining confidence. Mountain lion, puma. We have lots of names for them. They're not really that dangerous to humans. I mean, they can be, but mostly they avoid us. My uncle used to play sounds like that to scare them away from his property. The Yildena beside him made a sound that the translator couldn't parse, somewhere between a gasp and a death rattle. Mr. Chen, Professor Zethkar said carefully, are you telling me that this Class Alpha apex predator exists on your homeworld? Earth has lots of predators, Marcus replied, not yet grasping the full implications. Bears, wolves, tigers, sharks? Cougars are actually kind of middle tier, honestly. If the silence had been deafening before, what followed transcended all known acoustic phenomena. It was as if the universe itself had paused to process what the human had just said. Professor Zethkar's forearms began trembling slightly. "Mr. Chen," he said in a voice that was barely above a whisper, "I need you to remain after class. We need to discuss your homeworld's fauna in much greater detail." The lecture hall emptied faster than a breached airlock. Students didn't walk out. They fled, casting nervous glances back at Marcus as if he might suddenly sprout claws and fangs. The few brave souls who lingered did so only to stare in morbid fascination at the human who had just casually dismissed the galaxy's most feared predator call as middle tier. Professor Zethkar remained frozen at his podium, his normally pristine blue scales having shifted to an alarming pale green. What Marcus had learned was the Velthari equivalent of shock. "Professor," Marcus ventured, beginning to sense he'd made more than just a social faux pas. "Is everything okay?" The professor's primary hands gripped the podium while his secondary arms fumbled with his datapad. "Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something very important. That audio file, the one you identified as a cougar, was recovered from a research station where 43 scientists died. Not injured, died. The survivors' logs spoke of a creature so terrifying that 3 different species abandoned the entire system." Marcus felt his stomach drop. What? "But it's just a middle-tier predator from your homeworld," Professor Zethkar finished. "Yes, you mentioned that." He activated his datapad with shaking hands. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer honestly. The implications of your responses may be significant." "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "This cougar, how large would you estimate an adult specimen to be?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Maybe 7 feet long, tail included? They usually weigh around 120 to 200 pounds, depending on the region and subspecies." Professor Zethkar made a note, his scales flickering between pale green and deep blue. "And you said there are more dangerous predators on Earth?" "Well, yeah. I mean, a grizzly bear can weigh 800 pounds and has claws like railroad spikes. Polar bears are even bigger and more aggressive. Tigers can take down animals twice their size. And don't get me started on what lives in our oceans." "Our oceans?" The professor's voice cracked slightly. "Great white sharks, orcas, giant squids, box jellyfish that can kill you with a touch." Marcus trailed off as he noticed the professor had stopped taking notes and was simply staring at him. "Professor, are you feeling all right? You're looking a bit pale." Professor Zethkar set down his datapad with hands that trembled noticeably. "Mr. Chen, I need to contact the Galactic Biology Council immediately. What you're describing, if accurate, changes everything we thought we knew about Death World classifications." "Death World?" Marcus laughed nervously. "Earth's not a death world. It's actually pretty nice. Sure, there are dangerous animals, but humans figured out how to deal with them thousands of years ago. We're the apex predators on Earth." The professor's scales went completely white. You're the apex predators?" "Well, yeah. I mean, we don't hunt much anymore. Most of us just go to the grocery store, but historically humans hunted everything. Mammoths, cave bears, saber-toothed cats. If it moved and had meat on it, humans probably found a way to kill it and eat it." Professor Zethkar activated his emergency communication device with one trembling hand while continuing to stare at Marcus with all 4 eyes. "This is Professor Zethkar at Galactic Academy Station 7. I need an immediate priority channel to the Biology Council. Classification level, unknown. Possibly Omega." Marcus had never heard of an Omega classification, but something about the professor's tone suggested it wasn't good. "Professor, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Humans aren't really that scary. We're actually pretty friendly. We keep some of those predators I mentioned as pets." The communication device slipped from Professor Zethkar's grip and clattered to the floor. "Pets?" he whispered. "Sure. Dogs are descended from wolves. Cats are basically tiny tigers. Some people keep snakes, lizards, even sharks in aquariums. My neighbor back home has a rescued mountain lion, actually, though you need special permits for that. Professor Zethkar slowly sank into his chair, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. Mr. Chen, he said in a voice barely above a whisper, I need you to do me a favor. Of course, Professor. I need you to very carefully, very slowly, tell me everything you can about human evolution, hunting practices, and what you consider to be normal daily life on Earth. Marcus shrugged. Sure, I guess, but I should probably mention, I'm actually from a pretty peaceful region. If you want to know about the really tough stuff, you'd want to talk to someone from Australia or the Amazon. Those places are actually dangerous. The professor made a sound that the universal translator couldn't interpret, but that sounded suspiciously like a death rattle. Within 6 hours, the small conference room adjacent to Professor Zethkar's office had transformed into what could only be described as a crisis center. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the table, their various forms of stress response on full display. The air recycling system worked overtime to manage the cacophony of pheromones, musk, and other alien distress signals. Marcus sat at one end of the table, increasingly uncomfortable as he realized the magnitude of what was unfolding. At the other end, Director Kelnax of the Galactic Biology Council leaned forward with all three heads focused intently on the human. Let me ensure I understand correctly, Human Chen, Director Kelnax said, her primary head speaking while the other two observed. You're claiming that Earth hosts predators more dangerous than a Velnari bloodstalker, and that your species not only coexists with these creatures but actively domesticated some of them? I wouldn't say we domesticated sharks or bears, Marcus replied carefully. But dogs and cats, yeah. We've been living with them for thousands of years. Dr. Inhal, the Kethlani xenobiologist, spoke up with obvious effort. Mr. Chen, you mentioned great white sharks. Could you describe one? Marcus thought for a moment. They're pretty big fish, maybe 15 to 20 feet long, couple thousand pounds. Lots of really sharp teeth arranged in rows. They can bite through just about anything, and they're incredibly fast in the water. The room fell silent except for the sound of Dr. Inhal's species-specific fainting response. A series of rapid clicks followed by a soft thud as she toppled from her perch. And you said these creatures live in Earth's oceans? Pressed Commander Vektar, the Morgthul military advisor who had been called in when the Biology Council realized the potential implications. All over the place, Marcus confirmed. Though honestly, you're more likely to be struck by lightning than attacked by a shark. They mostly just want to be left alone. Now, if you really want to talk about dangerous sea life, there are these things called box jellyfish. No, Professor Zethkar interjected quickly. Please, no more sea creatures. Director Kelnax consulted her datapad, her secondary heads whispering to each other in rapid, untranslated Kelnari. Mr. Chen, our records indicate that humans have only been spacefaring for approximately 100 Earth years. This suggests that until very recently, your species shared a planet with all these apex predators, without any form of advanced technology. Well, yeah, Marcus said. I mean, we had tools, spears, bows, eventually guns. But for most of human history, it was just us, our brains, and whatever we could make with our hands. Commander Vektar's chromatophores flashed through the entire spectrum of his species' alarm responses. You fought these creatures with pointed sticks? Sometimes. Other times we used traps or persistence hunting or just avoided them. Humans are pretty good at adapting. We spread to every continent except Antarctica, and even there we've got research stations now. Antarctica? Dr. Muldoon, the environmental specialist, looked up from her readings. Our scans indicate that continent exists in perpetual sub-freezing temperatures with minimal life support capabilities. Yeah, it's pretty cold, Marcus agreed. But we figured it out. Humans live in deserts, tropical rainforests, Arctic tundra, high mountains, islands, pretty much everywhere. We're good at making tools and shelters. The room erupted in a babble of different languages as the assembled scientists and officials tried to process this information. Marcus caught fragments through the universal translator. Impossible survival parameters. Adaptation beyond known biological limits. Potential classification error in initial contact protocols. Director Kelnax called for order with a sharp whistle that cut through the chaos. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something, and please consider your answer carefully. When your species first made contact with the Galactic Federation, you were classified as a developing civilization with limited technological capabilities. Based on what you're telling us, this classification may have been incomplete. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I mean, we're not the most advanced species out there. We're still figuring out faster-than-light travel, our energy systems are pretty basic, and we've barely started exploring our own solar system thoroughly. But you survived and thrived on a world that appears to host multiple class alpha predators without any advanced technology, Commander Vector observed. Mr. Chen, what does your species consider to be the most dangerous predator on Earth? Marcus thought about it seriously. Honestly, other humans, historically speaking, we've been our own biggest threat for most of our existence. Wars, competition for resources, that kind of thing. Though mosquitoes have probably killed more humans than anything else, if you count disease transmission. Mosquitoes? Professor Zethkar asked weakly. Little flying insects. They bite you and suck your blood. Some of them carry diseases like malaria, dengue fever, yellow fever. Dr. Inhel, who had just recovered from her earlier faint, promptly fainted again. Blood-sucking parasitic vectors, Director Kelnax noted, her 3 heads now showing signs of severe stress. And you said they've killed more humans than your apex predators. Disease is tricky, Marcus acknowledged, but we've gotten pretty good at dealing with that too. Vaccines, medicines, mosquito control programs. Modern medicine has saved millions of lives. Commander Vector leaned forward. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something that may sound unusual. When your species looks at other humans, what do you see? Describe a typical human to me. Marcus blinked, confused by the question. Well, humans are pretty diverse. We come in different sizes, colors, build types. Average adult is maybe 5.5 to 6 feet tall, weighs anywhere from 100 to 300 pounds depending on lots of factors. We're bipedal, omnivorous, pretty good at using tools. And you see other humans as non-threatening? Generally, yeah. I mean, there are dangerous people, but most humans are just trying to live their lives. We're social creatures. We like being around other humans. The assembled group exchanged looks that Marcus was beginning to recognize as deeply concerned. Mr. Chen, Director Kelnax said slowly, I want you to consider something. You've just described a bipedal pursuit predator with advanced tool use capabilities, pack-hunting social structures, and the ability to adapt to any environment on a death world populated by creatures that terrorize half the galaxy. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. When she put it that way, are you saying, he asked quietly, that other species see humans as scary? The silence that followed was answer enough. 2 days later, Marcus found himself in the Academy's primary gymnasium, surrounded by what appeared to be half the station's population. Word had spread quickly through the academic grapevine, and apparently, watching a human demonstrate why Earth's predators weren't that scary had become the hottest ticket on the station. I really don't think this is necessary, Marcus protested as Professor Zethkar adjusted the holographic environment controls. I could just show you some videos from Earth's nature documentaries. Mr. Chen, Director Kelnax replied. All 3 heads focused on him with unnerving intensity. The Biology Council needs practical verification of your claims. If humans truly coexist with Class Alpha predators as a matter of routine, we need to understand the mechanisms involved. Besides, added Dr. Yimtao, the Academy's behavioral specialist, observing human responses to predator stimuli may help us understand how your species achieved such remarkable survival rates. Marcus sighed. Okay, but just so we're clear, I'm not some kind of wilderness survival expert. I'm an astrobiology student from suburban California. The most dangerous thing I usually deal with is traffic. The assembled crowd, a mix of faculty, students, and now several official observers from various galactic governments, murmured among themselves. The universal translator caught fragments. Suburban, traffic, not even a warrior class. Professor Zethkar activated the holographic environment. The gymnasium transformed into a dense forest scene, complete with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. "We'll start with something simple," he announced. "Computer, load Predator Scenario Alpha 7. Velnari Bloodstalker, hunting mode." The hologram flickered, and suddenly a massive creature materialized 30 feet away from Marcus. It stood nearly 12 feet tall, covered in chitinous black armor plating, with 6 legs ending in razor-sharp claws and a head that was mostly teeth. Its eyes, all 8 of them, locked onto Marcus with predatory focus. The crowd collectively gasped, and several students near the back quietly excused themselves from the gymnasium. The Bloodstalker let out the same bone-chilling roar they'd heard in class, a sound designed by millions of years of evolution to freeze prey in terror. Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying the creature. "Ha! It's bigger than I expected from the audio file." Dr. Yimtal consulted her readings frantically. "Remarkable." His stress hormones barely elevated. Heart rate increased only 15%. This should be triggering massive fight-or-flight responses. The Bloodstalker began its hunting display, a series of aggressive postures and vocalizations meant to disorient and terrorize prey before the kill. Marcus crossed his arms, watching with academic interest. "It's trying to make itself look bigger and more threatening," he observed. "Lots of Earth predators do that too. It's actually pretty similar to how a bear might act if it's trying to scare you away from its territory." "Bears?" Professor Zethkar asked weakly. "I'll show you later," Marcus promised. He looked back at the holographic predator. "The threat display is impressive, but it's putting a lot of energy into intimidation instead of just attacking. That suggests it's either territorial or trying to minimize risk of injury. Smart predator behavior, actually." Commander Vector leaned forward from the observation platform. "Mr. Chen, how would a human respond to encountering this creature in the wild?" Marcus considered this seriously. "Well, first thing would be to assess the situation. Is it actually hunting me, or did I just stumble into its territory? If it's doing threat displays like this, it might just want me to leave. I'd try to back away slowly, avoid direct eye contact, make myself seem non-threatening." "And if it attacked?" Dr. Yimtal asked. "Depends on what I had available," Marcus replied pragmatically. "If I had a weapon, gun, spear, even a decent-sized stick, I'd try to target the eyes or joints in that armor plating." "Impressive teamwork," Marcus noted approvingly. "Earth wolves do something similar, but these guys seem more sophisticated. Is this species tool users too, or just highly intelligent pack coordinators?" Dr. Yimtal checked her readings again, her feathers standing on end. "His fear response is virtually non-existent. If anything, he appears to be fascinated. It's really interesting predator behavior," Marcus explained. "You can see the intelligence in how they move, how they communicate with each other. On Earth, we've actually learned a lot about cooperation and hunting strategies by studying pack hunters." One of the holographic creatures let out a particularly piercing howl, a sound that had historically caused entire colonies to evacuate planets. Marcus nodded appreciatively. "That's a really effective intimidation call. Great acoustic properties for inspiring fear responses." He paused, looking around at the assembled crowd. "Though I guess you all already knew that." Director Kelnax's 3 heads conferred with each other in rapid whispers before she spoke. "Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something directly. Do you feel afraid of these creatures?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I'm certainly cautious around them. I mean, they're obviously dangerous predators. But afraid? Not really. They're just doing what predators do. It's like, if I saw a lion in the wild, I'd be very careful and respectful of what it could do to me, but I wouldn't be paralyzed with terror. Lions are just big cats. They have predictable behaviors, exploitable weaknesses, and they're not some unstoppable force of nature." The gymnasium fell silent except for the sound of Dr. Inhal fainting for the 3rd time in 2 days. "Computer, end all scenarios," Professor Zethkar said quietly. As the holographic forest faded away, Marcus looked around at the crowd of aliens staring at him with expressions he was learning to recognize as a mixture of awe and terror. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. The emergency session of the Galactic Biology Council convened at 0800 hours, Galactic Standard Time. The massive chamber on Council Prime was filled to capacity. Representatives from 47 different species had arrived within days of receiving the preliminary reports about the human situation. Marcus sat in a witness chair that had been hastily modified for human physiology, feeling increasingly small as beings from across the galaxy filed in to stare at him. Some took detailed scans with devices he didn't recognize. Others simply watched him with the kind of fascination usually reserved for specimens in a laboratory. High Counselor Vexthal called the session to order with a resonant tone that the universal translator rendered as attention. The ancient Zephyrian's crystalline form refracted the chamber's light into rainbow patterns as she addressed the assembly. "We convene today to address a matter of unprecedented significance," High Counselor Vexthal announced. 3 days ago, Professor Zethkar of the Galactic Academy made contact with our xenobiology department regarding what appeared to be a routine predator classification error. What we have learned since then necessitates a complete reevaluation of our first contact protocols and threat assessment procedures. She gestured toward a massive holographic display that showed a rotating image of Earth. The planet designated as Sol 3, commonly known as Earth by its dominant species, was initially classified as a standard habitability world with developing civilizations. We now have reason to believe this classification was insufficient. Director Kelnax rose from the Biology Council section. "Honorable counselors, after extensive interviews with Human Chen," she gestured toward Marcus, who gave a small, awkward wave, "we have compiled a preliminary assessment of Earth's biosphere and the survival adaptations of its dominant species." The holographic display shifted to show images of Earth's predators: lions, bears, sharks, tigers, crocodiles, wolves. With each new image, the murmur of concern from the assembly grew louder. What we initially assumed was a single-class alpha predator, the creature humans refer to as a cougar, appears to be among the least dangerous predators on Earth, Director Kelnax continued. Our assessment now indicates that Earth hosts no fewer than 15 class alpha predators, 43 class beta predators, and several hundred class gamma predators. The chamber erupted in alarmed vocalizations from dozens of different species. Furthermore, Director Kelnax continued once order was restored, the dominant species, humans, not only coexist with these predators, but actively hunted them for subsistence using primitive tools until very recently in their evolutionary timeline. High Counselor Vexthal's crystalline form darkened slightly, a sign of concern among her species. "Director, are you suggesting that Earth should be reclassified as a death world?" "We're suggesting something unprecedented," Director Kelnax replied. "We believe Earth should be classified as an apex death world, and humanity may require an entirely new classification category." Marcus raised his hand tentatively. Excuse me? Could someone explain what all these classifications mean? Because I'm getting the feeling we might have a misunderstanding here." Professor Zethkar activated his datapad. "Mr. Chen, perhaps you could help the Council understand by describing what humans consider normal physical exercise?" Marcus blinked, confused by the non sequitur. "Exercise? Well, running, swimming, lifting weights, sports like basketball or soccer. Some people like hiking, rock climbing, martial arts. Pretty much anything that gets your heart rate up and builds strength or endurance." "And this is recreational?" asked Counselor Tetwesel, her serpentine form coiled in what her species considered a defensive posture. "Sure. Most humans exercise for fun or to stay healthy. We're built for physical activity, running especially. Human ancestors used to hunt by just running after animals until they collapsed from exhaustion." The chamber fell silent. "Persistence hunting," Dr. Yimtal confirmed, consulting her notes. "Humans can maintain pursuit of prey across vast distances until the target animal suffers complete exhaustion. It's a hunting strategy that requires extraordinary physical endurance and intelligence. But we don't do that anymore," Marcus added quickly. Modern humans mostly just go to the gym or play sports for exercise. Though there are these things called marathons where people run 26 miles for fun. Commander Vector stood up, his chromatophores flashing urgent patterns. High Counselor, I must interrupt. My tactical analysis suggests we're facing a potential security situation that extends beyond biological classification. Explain, High Counselor Vexthal ordered. If humans are persistence predators with advanced tool use capabilities, pack coordination, and the ability to adapt to any environment, then Earth didn't just produce a successful species. It produced the ultimate apex predator. A species that views hunting-class alpha predators as routine. Marcus looked around the chamber in growing alarm. Wait. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. Humans aren't going around hunting aliens. We're explorers, scientists, diplomats. We joined the Galactic Federation because we wanted to learn and make friends, not because we're looking for new things to hunt. High Counselor Vexthal's form brightened, a sign of curiosity. Human Chen, when your species encounters something new or unknown, what is the typical response? Marcus thought about it. Well, usually we want to understand it, study it, learn about it, figure out how it works. Humans are pretty curious about everything. And if this new thing were dangerous, then we'd want to understand it even more, Marcus replied. Danger usually means there's something important we need to learn. Like, if there's a poisonous plant, we want to know what makes it poisonous, how to treat poisoning, maybe even how to use the toxin for medicine. Humans have turned a lot of dangerous things into useful things. The chamber erupted again, this time in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as panic. Director Kelnax called for order. Honorable counselors, based on our assessment, we recommend the following actions. First, Earth should be reclassified as an Omega-class death world, the first such classification in galactic history. Second, humanity should be classified as a Class Omega adaptive apex predator species, with special notations for tool use, pack coordination, and environmental adaptation capabilities. And third, High Counselor Vexthal asked, we recommend continued diplomatic contact, Director Kelnax said, her three heads looking directly at Marcus. Because despite being the most dangerous species we've ever encountered, they appear to be genuinely peaceful and friendly. Marcus stood up, feeling overwhelmed. Can I say something? The chamber quieted. I think maybe you're all overthinking this, Marcus said. Yeah, Earth has dangerous animals and humans learn to deal with them, but that doesn't make us monsters. It just makes us adaptable. We're not here to conquer anybody or hunt anything. We're here because the universe is amazing and we want to learn about all the incredible species and worlds out there. He looked around the chamber at the dozens of species represented. Crystalline beings, energy entities, hive minds, and things he couldn't even begin to categorize. I mean, look at all of you, Marcus continued. You've built this incredible civilization, you've mastered faster-than-light travel, you've created universal translators and artificial gravity and technologies I can barely understand. That's not the work of prey species. That's the work of incredibly intelligent, successful beings who solved their own survival challenges and then reached for the stars. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the session began, the chamber didn't respond with alarm. Maybe the real question isn't whether humans are dangerous, he said. Maybe it's what we can accomplish together, predators and prey species alike, when we're all working toward the same goals. High Counselor Vexthal's crystalline form brightened to a warm, golden hue. Human Chen, she said. I believe that may be the most frightening thing you've said yet. Why? Marcus asked. Because, she replied. It makes perfect sense. The chamber erupted in what Marcus had learned was the galactic equivalent of nervous laughter, and for the first time in days, he didn't think anyone was planning to faint. As the session concluded and representatives began filing out, Marcus overheard a fragment of conversation between two Kethlani diplomats. Certainly explains why they kept asking if we wanted to see pictures of their pets, and why they thought our emergency protocols were adorable. Marcus smiled to himself. Maybe being the galaxy's most accidentally terrifying species wasn't so bad after all. At least it meant no one would ever try to pick a fight with Earth. Though he made a mental note to warn the council before they got around to asking about Australian wildlife. Some things were better left as surprises.